Good morning, no, afternoon. Yeah, welcome to Relove Guitars. Sam here, and we've got a Pacifica body meets an EG112 neck. So that's not a Pacifica neck in my book, but it's matched up with this one. I could be wrong, might be, that's how they did them. I thought it wasn't the same, but anyway, it's a modified and much loved guitar, and it's in today for a setup. And Chris has brought it down from Coventry on a sort of flying visit, so we're going to do the setup on the clock, and to that end, well, I've been charging the batteries and stuff. I've done a bit of preparation already. What we've got here is a Callahan heavy block, big block thingy bridge. Not sure what the pickups are in here, but they look pretty nice. I'm sure they are. It's a Gilmore-esque arrangement going on. We've got Gilmore GHS strings over there, and we've got some ratio tuners to go on as well. And these are oh, I have to figure out which is which. I hope they tell me which is which. Yeah, 6 are numbered. Good. So this is in for a change of nut, for a Tusk nut, a change of tuners, setup, remove some play wear along the setup as well. Frets aren't brand new. It's been played a lot over the years, but it's still enough life in it to do it. Now, I've kind of gone ahead, as I've said. I've done a few things in preparation because of the time constraint. So I've prepped my banana tool there with some fresh, nearly the very last of my 400 grit self-adhesive, so I've got to find some more. But that's prepped and ready, brand new. I've set the action really low. I've set the relief really flat. I've put the new Tusk nut on. Haven't obviously done the tuners yet, but I thought I'll use the old strings and everything, set it up just the way I want it now, and get on with the leveling. So we are kind of ahead of the game, or it's a quicker jump in than I would probably normally do. So straight into the land of probably too far out. Hey, into the land of leveling. So having set the action to 1.5 last fret here, 1.2 last fret there, flatten the neck out, suddenly becomes really easy to play. But we're going to level it just to make sure that bends and notes, all individual bends and notes, play well. Now, it's one of these guitars that's old enough to have sort of mostly self-leveled. That's why I'm not expecting to find any really unusual ups and downs here. Well, it might be in the neck, but I wouldn't expect to find any uneven frets particularly. So this is a process now of just ironing out any little ripples. People coming and going on motorbikes here today. Not usually here in the day, as you probably know. Interestingly, the end of this isn't cut perfectly, so the nut is sitting on as perfectly as the nut can sit on. But you can just see a tiny gap. It's just the way it is, unfortunately. Sure, I don't want to go and start cutting the end of that. It's not an advisable thing to do. It's just one of those odd things about fitted bits of, or the way they've cut the end. Right, so I'm going to just get straight on into what I'm going to do is a very light leveling here, because I think I'm pretty convinced that we'll find that everything is more or less flat. And although I am seeing a little bit of variation here, but we'll see what it tells us. Quite common that the first fret is actually a little bit low. So looking at this, we can straight away see that just looking at the dust, some guitars with the dark rosewood or that kind of board shows up the leveling much easier, because you can see the light coloured dust build up. So we've clearly got a high spot here, a bit of high there, a low spot here, a little high one there, low ones there, a little bit of high there. So there is the usual sort of expected up and down, but I'm kind of not expecting there to be any stand out a mile high or low frets. Well, individual ones. What we will find, as we always do, is that there are groups of high and low frets. It's fairly common to find. So when you're trying it out like this, what you're kind of looking out for is, particularly when you know you're putting your fretting into a darker, an uncut area. That's a low area. So I'm kind of expecting to hear a tiny bit of zizz around about here. And it's there. So these two little patches, a low patch there and a low fret there, those two things are just causing the frets to, or the string to on the frets. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to come down this end and I'm just going to gently work the leveling beam up and down a bit. And the real purpose of this is I just need to try and even everything out a bit. And if you think about the dynamics of a low fret will make the next fret relatively high, whether it is high in respect of the average of the board or not. So a low fret causes the same effect as a significantly high fret. But the difference is a high fret is kind of easy to take down because your beam just finds it and scoops it down to where it should be. A low fret, you have to bottom out everything around it. I don't need to do that. Yeah, you end up bottoming out everything around it, which is what I had to do there. So it's a little bit more expensive in terms of material because the low fret costs, the low fret costs fret metal on the surrounding frets, and that's what you have to basically do to. I'm just going to get that first fret a little bit hit. Yeah, so you have to level out, bottom out the low spot, and you know that's in terms of sheer volume of fret material, that is in fact a more costly process. It's simple as that. I'm not taking off hardly any material here as it happens. I'm just kind of diagnosing, making sure that everything will play. Not bad. It's pretty good, in fact. Now we go to the G track. Now the G track is often critical. I'm rushing along with this because of the time. I'm not rushing. I'm not explaining in great detail, shall I say. Because of the time, this has to be, you know, ready and done and happy with it for Chris's return a little bit later. And I'm sure there's plenty of time, but I never want to run it to the edge, so there's no options, if you get what I mean. Yes, so the G track, as I call it, is often a very critical one. And whilst on one hand all the tracks need to be level, the G one is significant because if it isn't, it's where you find that the high E bends will very often choke out on the G track. And so at this point in time, I'll be testing, when I've leveled the G track, I will be testing the high E bends up at the top end here to make sure they can all go across. Now, not that they weren't before, you know, I'm sure that Chris had it set so it would play with no problem, but what we've done is we've lowered the action quite considerably, relatively speaking, so we're kind of putting it under a lot more pressure to perform. So typically, first of all, we check the I'm just going to check this neck and see if it's still got relief. That's okay. It's not bad as individual notes. There's a tiny, I wonder if I'm a little bit low on this G. Let's just check this out again. Yes, I am. I'm down at just over a millimetre, which is a fraction too low. That's what I'm hearing. These are minuscule amounts of variation, so now what I'm going to do now is try the bends. To the point being that when you lower the action, bends that worked fine at a higher action are very likely to choke out or run into problems on the lower action because you've removed clearance space that the strings need, and also the dynamics or the geometry of it is that is when you bend up into the G track, you're actually bending the E string uphill, and so that the top point of the string is at the top of the hill and then the anchor point at either end is down at the bottom of the hill if you look at it in cross section. And because of that geometry and because of the reduction of the height of the action, those two things conspire to cause choke out when you bend. That's good. Happy with that. I've got rid of that little zizzing that was going on as well, which I call fret slap, which is a whole different kettle of buzz. It's a sort of, it's not really distinct from, but I kind of see it as a different, slightly different kind of buzz to the normal fret buzz caused by high or low frets. And that's the one that we can conceive quite easily, visualize of one fret being too high, or maybe one being low and the other one's behaving relatively high. So that's the familiar type of fret leveling. You think of fret buzz when a fret's getting in the way. But since I've been doing this, I've discovered that what's also very common is another quality of buzz, which I've called fret slap to distinguish it. It's just a term I've come up with just so I'm making a distinction between the two. And fret slap seems to be, and it's not scientific, but it seems in my experience to be the product not of individual high or low frets, but of groups of them. So the result of the waviness, the general sort of pull out wide angle waviness of the fretboard. And what I've discovered is that if you keep on fret leveling, you tend to be able to get away with it, reduce it, because you will eventually kind of iron out that waviness as well. But what I've also found is that it works better if you, when you've done what you consider to be the fret buzz, the individual high and low frets, if you want to then tackle fret slap, to imagine allowing the fixed curve of this beam to impose itself gently onto the waviness of the whole thing. So I'm not looking to wear down any one individual fret. What I want is this fixed, fairly stiff curve to sit on there and just nip away whatever lumpy bits are sticking out. So that's what I'm sort of doing here. Rather than not aiming, almost on these lower ones, I've sort of gone into fret slap reduction mode rather than fret buzz, because that's usually what guitars suffer more from, is overall fret slap, especially on the lower strings. And that's because the lower strings spin more, so they require more accuracy or more precision, ergo a little tiny bit more space. Now obviously you know that without doing this leveling business, you can gain that space by either increasing the relief in your neck or by raising the playing action at the bridge end. A little bit of fret slap there, see? Not bad. Yes, but of course the whole point being is we don't really want to compromise the action. My setup is all about making the frets adapt or comply with the action that we've chosen we want to have and play with. So what I'm doing now is I'm basically letting the curve of this thing, could even be going like that in a way, but letting the curve of this thing even out or alleviate that last bit of fret slap, which I was hearing down at the end by the nut more than anything. And then so that overall that last little pass there was hardly any pressure, so it didn't take off much in the way of material, but what it did take off cleans up those notes. Ta-da! And now we calibrate the last track of the set. As you can see, my little feet things here. The subtlety of this calibration is quite important. It looks like I'm sort of whizzing through, doing a couple of little adjustments. What I'm doing here is I'm bending this rod to match the curvature, not exactly of the neck, and that's the interesting part about this. I'm matching the curvature of the neck as described by these three digital sample points, and that doesn't reproduce the up and down bumpiness. What it does is it gives me an idealized curve as represented by this. This is now in a smooth curve without any ups and downs. This is an approximately the same curve, but it has its variances or variations. This perfect curve then maps on top of the imperfect curve, and it's that little function that I've noticed does a great job in alleviating the what I call the fret slap. And actually, I got to say, it is why most 99% of my setups are loved by customers. Now, occasionally, there are very occasional times where I don't go far enough, and I chicken out, and I've given guitars back with a little bit of fret slap left in there for the action I've chosen. But that's my sort of nerve failing too early, and of course a tiny bit of raising of the action fixes that. But now this is so this has got virtually no curvature in it at all. It's very, very flat, and we've got we're not really at 1.5, so I am pushing that a little bit too much. That's about 1.2, and that, I have to say, that is about top SG performance level, so I'm being a bit over challenging here. What I'll do is I'll give this one more light kissaging with the in the fret slap reduction mode. Yeah, so the point is, I'm not trying to brag here. That one of the reasons why what I do here I think works is this little fairly unscientific thing that I've discovered over time about the alleviating the fret slap, and I think most of all making that working distinction between the two things. Now, I'm not saying that there is a real meaningful scientific distinction between the two things. It's a working distinction that helps me set my mind on doing one thing two different ways in the same process. Actually out of tune, but very low indeed. Very flat and very low. I might just do a tiny bit more on this A track. And that's all I'm going to do. So here we go, A track. A little bit more on you, and repetitions, but not so much downward pressure. I just want to map this curvature if I can. There we go. So some people, I've had people make and ask me to try out sort of very nice flexible beams that can sit against the fingerboard and sit under the strings and everything, and that's cool. But actually the reason I like this is that for this reason, I don't want any flexible thing to flatten out to the average curve. I want this extra stiffness here now to just scoop out the humps and bumps, and that's good for me. So that's the fret leveling done. So from now on we're sort of whizzing forward to the fret crowning part. Now the crowning part will always tell you how much work your frets have had either on this pass or on a previous one. So in this one it's not taken that much. The frets have been worn flat, fairly flat by play. So we'll see, it will probably look like some big flattened areas to clean up, but that's okay. What I'm looking for, that. So after this we've got we've got the crowning to do, then we've got cleaning everything, checking everything. At this point we can take the strings off and get rid of them. They've done their business. And after that, well, while the strings are off, we've got the tuner holes to ream out and the new tuners, the new ratio tuners to fit. I haven't yet ever treated myself to a set of those, although I do like the look of them, so I'll enjoy just having a first-hand look at Chris's here, since he's invested in them, so I get to have a look, which is a nice thing about doing this sort of work. I don't have to, I can evaluate things without putting out the money up front, which is a kind of bonus really. Okay, so there goes the old strings. I might have to take off the cover on the back, which I think I ought to do just for easy access. Lovely, great big solid block here. Callahan, it's not a cheap unit, the Callahan tremolo block, but as you can probably see, it's yeah, it's good and chunky, no messing about. Okay, so we'll be getting rid of these yucky things shortly and putting the replacements on. Let me just zoom out again. Sorry about that. It's all a nice view until I go into the crappy long view. Crappy long view. Is that the cartoon Pippi Longstocking? Right, and what I'll do is I'll just snap these off here. Missed. Thank you. Yes, so world update today. I don't know, whatever day 20 in the war against the Ukraine by the Soviet Union. And I heard an interesting, I mean, first of all, everything is propaganda, right? It's simple as that. We have to, anyone with any sense will recognize that everything going on from all sides is propaganda, and you wouldn't expect it any other way, really, in war. And it sounds bizarre to even say that, you know, without standing back and going, what am I saying? War? But it's the truth. The truth is that there is no truth in war. It's all it's mostly propaganda. However, as I was listening to some analysis earlier on, which was quite interesting, and I guess I found it interesting partly because I earnestly hoped it would be true if anything positive could come out of this. And the piece, I don't know which newspaper or which online thing it was, you've probably seen it. Again, for all I know, this could be inverse Russian, Chinese propaganda, whatever. But the piece talked about how there's a view, you could hold a view that the Ukraine invasion could forestall a third world war, and you kind of look at that and go, all right, go on, tell me how, since we're more worried about it starting one than anything else. But and the writer said, you know, whatever else has happened, that the NATO's unified response, leaving aside that it doesn't extend to no-fly zones, which I personally, for what it's worth, I totally agree with the senior military people who are avoiding that steadfastly, because that definitely does trip over into a world war, which there's no getting out of, and there may not be anyway, but it's going to be far harder if you shoot down a Russian MiG and destroy its air control flight, you know, its fighter control radars and stuff. Anyway, so the writer says that to the degree to which NATO has swung together and without any real discussion, enforced sanctions or imposed sanctions, and to the degree to which Russia seems to have shown itself to be actually very militarily ill prepared, or not as capable as we might have believed over the years. It may actually, the one positive outcome, if there is one, and if the world doesn't get blown up, might be that the Chinese rethink the strategy of retaking Taiwan, because the argument would go that their dependence on the rest of the world, including a lot of NATO, for their trade and their well-being is huge, and if they have a view now, if they get a good sense that NATO would do the same, whatever regardless of what we'd lose in spare parts and things we buy from China, hang all of that if you're in a if you're one step from war. But it might be that this has hopefully given the Chinese something to consider, that just the fact that NATO is more united than they may have thought, and certainly probably more united than the Russians, or than Putin and his generals and politicos thought. So, it's not exactly good, but in a way it's a good thing to have come out of it. I want to see some hope for some positive. So if there can be, that would be good. The problem is how and it sounds ridiculous to be saying this, but how to extricate Russia, leaving Putin aside as as a sort of a piece of history, that has a limit. Can we enable Russia to get out of this in a way that doesn't automatically head towards all-out war either at the hands of Putin or somebody else that thinks that all is now lost, might as well go the whole hog. So it's a tricky one. But let's say somehow we get past that point, so that mutually assured destruction isn't inevitable. Then potentially, if we survive this lot, then it is possible. It's a reasonable case to make that possibly this will have been useful for dissuading the Chinese from a similar kind of adventure. I'd love that to be true, and I'm sure you would too. Right, so just to come down this end a minute, I'm removing the horrible butterfly string tree and going for the tusky one. To do this, I will slightly over drill, so I can first of all find the right drill bit, slightly over drill the hole just to give the screw a bit of room. What I never want to do is overstress it and end up splitting the headstock. But for that I will need it's fully charged, my drill, which I have to take back home in a minute. I've got things to do tonight. So the first thing I'm going to do is just widen this. Not too much, not all the way down, just enough to ease the screw. Easing of the screw. Now we can either try thank you, the long screw. Actually, I'll go for the longer one. Yeah. Anyway, so that was a thought. Well, that'd be quite an interesting hope. So I'll leave that off for a minute because I want to clean the headstock anyway. So the next bit of fun. Here we go, removing the original tuners, and we're going to do some reaming with a hand thing, which is a bit of a pain. Actually, you know what we can do? We can use the staggered drill thing a little bit and get a little away on either side. It's much easier than hand reaming, but we can finish the middle of the hole with the hand reaming thing. So here we are removing the grotty pressed tuners, but you know, as you'll know from any of my videos, they are perfectly good enough to keep this guitar in tune. And as I've said a million times before, if your guitar won't stay in tune, it has naught to do with your tuners. Improving your tuners improves them in only a couple of respects. One of them is that you get better gearing and a much smoother and more precise feeling for when you're tuning, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's a nice to have. And the other thing is that they, you know, better tuners look great and they have nicer materials and stuff, and they feel better about yourself. But nowhere in that did I include they make your guitar stay or play in tune better, because they don't, and that's the misunderstanding that a lot of people have. So I suggest that people never go ahead to replace tuners if they find themselves with a tuning stability problem. Take care of the nut first and the unreleased slack in the strings. Those are your culprits. And once you've done that, you'll find that you'll find that your tuning improves. Also, of course, the other thing about tuning that's critical is I like to say it's 50% the right nut, and by the right nut I mean tusk material, which is self-lubricated, but importantly, ideally, either perfectly cut or factory cut slots. So the better, more factory-like condition they can be in, the better. But if you get your nut and your slots right, then the other half of the deal is getting your strings fully stretched out. So we've got to go to 10 millimeters, and I've got this drill thing here that will go to 10 millimeters. It's the next step on this thing. So I'm going to go down in. The good thing about this one, it keeps it central, and it's a bit tidier than doing the thing with a reamer. So there's our 10 millimeter hole on the top, and there. And unlike doing it on a pillar drill, there's no risk of anything splitting out the back, because it doesn't go all the way through anyway. So there's my drill through. It's obviously right now it's not through cleanly all the way. It's tapering, but I'll do it the other way on the other side as well. And then I'll meet up in the middle with the reaming thing, which makes it easier. There we go. So that's kept the holes actually tidier than when you do it with a reaming thingamajig. And this then will, obviously that will fit in, but that won't fit in quite yet. So these have two little, oh, I see, very nice. Right, these are numbered, aren't they? 5. What I don't know is which end is which number, so I'll check the flaming manual. I'll read the goshed manual. So it's still a bit grubby because I've got mucky bits on there from the sanding. Where are the numbers? Oh God, can I actually read the numbers? Okay, thank you. 1 to 6. So 6 is on the inside here. Fine. So that's the sort of bulk work of that done. Now I have to do this bit by hand and just do again to go through both sides, and we're just widening the hole. And again, because it doesn't burst through the other side, it doesn't have any risk to splitting anything out. We're just now following through, if you like. So yes, that's my secret hope, that we find a way that the Russians can get out of this. I mean, one way the Russians can get out of it, I suppose, is that the sort of next in line in the power hierarchy kind of either persuade Putin to stand down, get out of the way, let them clear up the mess, or to enact some plan that will help bring this to a halt. Some sane minds have got to be adding up that getting out sooner, even with effectively having to say this was not a good idea and we now are responsible for fixing the mess we've created, even that has got to be better than just pushing it forward to nuclear Armageddon just because you can't think of any other way out. So that's a kind of that's a man on the street logic, but unfortunately isolated dictators don't necessarily always want to listen to that logic. So we shall see. I suppose the other alternative is that somebody else, there was another interesting report talking about how another pressure is going to could come from increasing unrest from his own people, as we're seeing some very courageous stands being taken at personal cost, and I don't think any of these things will ever happen in isolation. So I think that if we simultaneously see any faltering by the army in its loyalty to this task, I think then it might be a combination of the resisting public who don't agree with it. That may be a time for them to take to the streets and try to sue for change, as you might say. And I think that if the West has any sense, it will, even though you would think that the man should be punished, then you still would hope that the West would enable an out even at this point, even after all of this terrible damage has been done. You would hope, only because the alternative is even worse. I mean, two bads don't make it better. So we shall see. Let's just hope that the old man and the old men feel that they have a way out, and that is an important consideration. Okay, looks like we're just about in on all of these. Yep, there we go. Job done. Now what we have as part of the game, we have sort of matching bits, and these are these triangular rhombus shaped bits that we're going to use as our converters. There should be a full set of 6 of these, and they should be thick enough that they just hold, when they're in place, they just hold the yeah, that's about right. They should, those, I don't know how well you can see that. Those little, so we screw in the original screw holes, and then once we've done that, we should find that the 2 extra little holes do a good job as receptors for the little pins on here to hold the thing in place, because all we need to do is hold it in place, and then the thing that will keep it firmly in place is the ferrule coming at it from the other side. So we'll get all of these in. In fact, we'll do it with a one of these. Nope. Line up. So I've got it on setting 1 torque setting. Oh, that's not part of it. That don't belong there. 5, yeah. So these should all neatly go in place like so. good little unit. It means I don't have to fill in any holes with matchsticks and the like. So anyway, that's where we are at day 20. And it's funny how when you go on to, you see online that there are people now feeling, some people feeling very gung-ho about the sort of showing of Russian military, and now they feel very confident in the prowess of the US and NATO together, and that may be the case, you know, and there's a lot of quite gung-ho-y type statements saying things like, you know, right now we can see that the NATO would absolutely cream Russia for the control of the skies, so on and so forth. But that isn't very helpful, you know. And it may even be true, but it's only useful insofar as somebody else may think of it and be aware of it, but not that we should ever want to be in that position to put it into practice. Because when you're at that point, wrong way around. When you're at that point, you're close to a point of no return of any kind, which I, for one, don't wish to be in. There we go. So that's our new thingies, and then our thingies go in there, but they don't go that way. They go 6. Oh yeah, look at that. Let's turn it over. Let's get our ferrules. Oh look, we got new screws which I didn't use because the thing said you can use the original screws with the rhyme at the same time. So here we have the first one in. 5. So my thing is to check. I try to check any sign of jingoism, you know, where I might see a Ukrainians getting their upper hand on something, and I might be tempted to go, yes, trounce those Ruskies, you know, and I have to keep an eye out that I don't start getting like that, because I don't want any of those poor kids in personnel carriers to get smoked on either side. It's all of it's hideous, and all of it brings us closer to some place we don't want to be, closer to nowhere else left to go, and that's the worrying bit. Anyway, so I don't know whether YouTube considers this type of conversation unfriendly to their advertisers. Almost certainly they probably do, but I've watched other people doing podcasts and the like, and absolutely not mentioning anything to do with this situation. It just seems completely loony to be standing here pretending that I'm not thinking quite a bit of the time about the possibility that in a very short time I'm going to be toast, courtesy some large clouds on the horizon that I'd hoped never to see in my lifetime. And is that one not sitting fully in? Yeah, so you know, to sort of carry on doing podcasts and videos and whatever as if that never happened. So you know, there's people out there on. I watched some sailing ones and travel things and stuff, and the people out there, a lot of them are yeah, quite steadfastly avoiding talking about it, because I guess it's it's not what their advertisers might want to hear, or they may get demonetized, or whatever. It's just not great. So, but I can't see how it can be real without dealing with it in some way or shape, because that's what's going on. Right, all of these little bits will go into back in the box. I forgot to clean the headstock, but I'll do it now with some naphtha and a clean cloth. It's pretty clean anyway. I will clean the fingerboard properly more shortly, but let's get some naphtha on here, which is back. Where did I put it? Here. Right. Give this a wipe down. So the next thing as you saw, I have recrowned the frets, so they are now rounded off, so that any flat spots incurred in the leveling process will now be kind of returned to an arch shape, the way they should be. So the next part of this is a sort of off the camera bit, where I will mask off the neck and basically sand and polish out the frets. And I am running short on masking tape. Oh, I've got a couple more out there. I've got one here as well. So I can see a little bit of damage still on the fret here. I leave it in because my principle is to, or my guiding principle is to, I will remove as much as I can without sacrificing fret metal just for the cosmetic grooves. So I will stop when it's in its level, and I won't continue just to remove that little groove. Now it'll sort of minimize when I sand and polish it out, but I won't have taken away a ton of extra fret metal in pursuit of it, because I don't think it's a good exchange. And as I said many times before, at this sort of level, it's almost entirely cosmetic. In other words, it doesn't actually prevent play until it gets very, very much worse. And a working example of how far it can go is Brian May with his Red Special, and that thing is absolutely worn with the biggest grooves you can imagine on a guitar, and he claims to have never refretted it, which in 60 years or whatever, it's 50 plus years, is quite hard to believe, but if you take his word for it, he's never refretted it, and wow. And he's still playing, and it doesn't get in the way of him gigging, for example. So anyway, what I'm going to do here is I'm going to add a couple of strips to here to cut some thin bits. Can I do it? Yeah, there's one there. So I have to cut little different size strips to get to the closer together frets and get the fingerboard covered up safely. I'll also use a thinner tape as well in conjunction with that, so two little things. Anyway, yes, where were we? Masking tape, frets, oh yeah, grooves, fret wear, and playability. So I used to think that it was, you had to take off any wear like that. The only time I've noticed it's really a problem for playing is when it's I suppose like a chip, and you often find that on 0 fret guitars, you can the tension, the constant pressure of the string against the 0 fret metal causes it to notch in a very particular way, and that notching isn't a slow, soft curve like the fret wear that you see in the sort of lower part of the neck, around the cowboy cords as people call them. It's much more of a straight, sort of noticeable little notch, and the problem with that is that when the string goes into it, it very definitely... have I cut this one up? I think I've missed doing that one, haven't I? Yes, when the string goes into that the little 0 fret notch, it clicks, and it's a really annoying thing, especially if you ever do any bending near the nut. Just even, you know, your honky-tonk woman sort of bends, it just doesn't work without clicking. Anyway, so well, that is why I would replace a 0 fret, or at minimum sand it out if necessary, but I wouldn't do that just for that softer damage down there. That's my logic. So here's the next few. We'll just use this stuff up because I bought loads of it. Anyway, so today I am going to do this, go home. I'm taking a load of soldering stuff home because I've got Daniel's 2 headless things. I'm going to rewire them. We've been having some interesting discussions about how the wiring on those guitars should work. It's quite a good case study about the holy grail belief around tone and meets practicality. So Daniel's not an electronics person, and he's supplied me with a lot of research material from Alan Holdsworth fans, guitarists who are Holdsworth fans, and they've obviously done a lot of work on Holdsworth's tone and his preferences and equipment and so on. And anyway, the sort of outcome of all of that is a wiring diagram, which I've worked to and has been shared widely and seems to be the standard for doing it the Alan Holdsworth way for a single pickup setup. And then there's a wiring diagram which is a fairly standard humbucker circuit, but with some extra resistors in 2 places, and then there's an absolute ton of discussions about brands of parts, types of capacitors, and so on and so on. And so I have to try and separate out 2 things. One is I've tried to explain the functionality of the thing, which is kind of easier to look at, and you can say, okay, this thing, in the case of the ones I'm doing for him, it's like Holdsworth, but I'm adding in a coil split for Daniel as well at his request. So it's a Holdsworth circuit, volume and tone, and the tone is a push-pull for the coil split, and the volume is just a standard pot, well, relatively standard pot. So the challenge is, the diagram shows the addition of some a resistor instead, in place of the regular wire off the volume pot input lug branching off. So instead of just connecting it with a wire to the tone, or to hook the tone up to it, instead of a wire, this diagram uses a resistor, a 220k resistor shown in the diagram, and that takes the place of the jumper to the tone. Now technically I can't tell you what that resistor does exactly, but it's turning an ordinary wire into a wire with a transistor in line part of the way down it. So that's how it's changed. I'm not quite sure what it's meant to do, but that's how it's changed physically. So the next bit, the only next difference really from anything conventional, is that there is then a 12k resistor connected between the hot input terminal on the volume pot, the input lug, and between that and the output lug, the center lug. And that's got that diagram shows a 12k resistor in there. So that's really all the major fundamental notable differences are in that circuit. Obviously I'm adding into it a I'm adding into it a push-pull pot that isn't drawn in their circuit, but that's no big deal. That's just an additional add-on. So the problem is that when I hook that up, well, first of all, there is no reliable description or no dependable description of what what effect that creates. So what you have is a lot of Holdsworth experts talking for a long time about a lot of very subjective things. You know, his trademark honky tone, his trademark this tone, and everyone's describing it in their own ways that mean something to them. But none of it is objective or standardized or can be proven. So my first challenge, and I guess if you're a guitar fixer-upper type person, you'll recognize this is a horrible start point. My start point is that I've been given what I've been told is the right diagram, but my customer is expecting who knows what exactly as the outcome from this, because none of the things that are described as the output really make a lot of objective sense. They're all very subjective, experiential things described in different ways by different people. The nearest to anything objective is that somehow it's like Alan Holdsworth, but you know, even how I would describe Alan Holdsworth is very different from how I know Daniel would, for example. And I won't get into that because we'll probably not be friends afterwards. Anyway, that aside, so the tricky bit is to have a brief where somebody's expecting a modification that they found for you with, you know, with pretty good provenance, pedigree, whatever, but that is expected, a modification that is expected to produce a certain outcome, which is very difficult to describe in any objective sense, and therefore is also very, very difficult to measure in any objective sense as well. So I might well describe it completely differently from how Daniel will describe the net result of it. But remember, all we've done for this so-called different circuit is to add in 2 small resistors. Nothing else is fundamentally different or unexpected or unusual. So that, I mean, that was the first thing that caught my attention, was the limits to what was actually changing, which was 2 tiny resistors. The more I read or have read of the various things that the changes are supposed to do, they sound incredibly subtle anyway, which again puts me into that territory of, would you really even stake your life on being able to hear the difference of that resistor in line or not? And that's a very difficult one to swear by. So that alone in itself is another additional objectivity problem. But having said that, I've got this diagram. My customer says, okay, I want you to do it this way. 1000 grit, 1000 grit, 1000 grit, 1000. So off I go to, are you kidding me? Where's my 1500? God. How many sheets? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. All right, so they haven't sent the 1500 yet. Okay, I thought, right, so I'm scraping along short the 1500. Well, I've got just enough to do this with. Anyway, yeah, so here I've got this thing. So my customer has a sort of a kind of vague expectation. I don't mean that in any negative way, but at best an experiential one that he could best describe in reference to what he likes about Holdsworth's tone, which is a subjective experience, i.e. hearing. So that's tricky. And then on top of that, I've got a diagram that isn't up for grabs. It's only one diagram. Everyone seems to say that's the Holdsworth wiring. That's what you do. So I've got it and I've done it once, and the output of it I then could only describe myself, could only describe back to Daniel, which is, well, I've done it, and here's what I think happens overall. So in describing it, he then gets my description. More than likely, this is the funny part, more than likely, my description doesn't bear much resemblance to the actual thing if he experienced it, but my description of it probably, in fact I'm almost certain, makes him think, oh shit, that's not going the way I want. I wanted it to sound, I'm not quite sure what I expected, but I expected something else, which is fairly common. So he's gone and found me more information, which I've read through, and actually it's all mostly a lot more holy grail, quite a lot of smoke and mirrors in there too. And I'm not knocking that, because there's nothing better and more rewarding than being completely nerdy about your favorite band, car, aeroplane, technical widget, guitar, whatever you like to get right inside the nerdiness of. So everyone does it, we all do it. But, so I've done this thing once. Now I'm going to do it a second time, and I'm fairly confident that I won't get any different results. It makes a sound, nothing wrong with the sound. The tone is very minimal in its effect. It doesn't go from mud to sparkly. It goes from clearish to a little tiny bit clearer in its full range. The volume goes from it goes up 100% or 90% from 3 to 4. There's a big jump from 3 to 4, and then it sort of goes up, but doesn't actually sound any louder. But it is, you can sort of tell it's getting a bit louder, but it's suddenly plateaued off, and that's what it does on the volume. And it does it on both the guitars, which are following the same wiring diagram. So I'm pretty sure I got it right, but I'm going to redo it, and that's going to be the end result. But it's a little bit unsatisfactory in a way, because it's the danger when you're working for a customer and it's hard for them to know exactly what they want, and very difficult for you to express what you've got, and for them to subjectively try and interpret that and assess whether what you've described is anywhere near what they've described they want. And you can see there's at least 2 different descriptions going wrong in there, plus 2 different perceptions of the hearing, of the the experiencing of the thing. So it's very, very flawed when it comes to tone, as many people who set up guitars and make modifications will no doubt have discovered to their cost before me. But I've just tried to be very clear with Daniel about this, is that when we talk about the diagram he's given me, no amount of changing the brand of the pots within that diagram will change the basic function. If I get the same basic steep volume raise on the next wiring, that's all you can ever get from that wiring diagram. That's exactly why it's doing it. And if it doesn't match what you really wanted, then you have to go and find a wiring diagram that gives you what you really wanted, unless we can agree on what that is in front, which we didn't start that way around. He started by telling me there's a tone that I know that these people say you get this way, go and do that for me. So yeah, tricky, the subtleties of doing customer work. But I'm hoping I'm going to sit down at home tonight and I'm going to take my time, redo them. It's a little bit costly because I never reuse the components twice. I don't like to do that. It's just it introduces risks, basically. There's too much risk of something melting. Anyway, so back to this one. Time's going good at the moment, I think. I want to be home by 3:30. It's 2:45 now. That's what I'm gonna do. Get this polished out, listen to the radio, have a drink, come back when I'm cleaning the whole thing and the fingerboard, putting the strings on, and we'll be done. Ooh. See you in a minute. Alrighty, here we are, ready to get everything sorted out. Strings on, stretched, intonated. So, guitar is, the frets are sanded and polished. The fretboard is cleaned. The black pickguard and everything is cleaned with naphtha and shined up, but it gets dusty immediately, so it's impossible to keep it clean. So the next step is to get some oil on the fretboard before restringing, and you can see it's become quite dry after having cleaned it with the naphtha, which is always the way. So I'm just going to rub in some oil. This being lemon oil, just cause I don't know about you, but my life is too short to be arguing about the merits of various oils. But hey, if I was in a Spitfire owners club, maybe I'd be arguing to that degree about the types of oils to use in the Merlin engine or something techie and nerdy. But when it comes to making a fingerboard look a bit darker and less dry, then oil is oil, really. It could be margarine if you haven't got anything else. So I'm just going to take the sort of standing stuff off there. So we come to restring, and we've got the tuners on, new tuners on. Well, let's put the truss rod cover back on. We've got the Gilmore GHS strings. Let's put this on. There you go. This one. Right. There you go. That's that. Right. So time to load up all the strings. Now, do they make it easy or hard? Well, there's a tear. Oh, wrong way around. I didn't want to do it that way. Let's do it this way. Yes, one can tear them out. So just push them all through first, and then do them after that. Rip, rip, rip. That's much better. I quite like tearing that instead of having to get a knife out and do it, which I always have to do normally. So we're in the final thing. So it was about 20 minutes, 25 minutes of polishing and stuff. And then don't forget there's time at the beginning where I did the nut. It didn't take much work on the nut. I mean, it didn't take much sanding and shaping, but I had to do it a couple of little tweaks to make sure it was at the right height, because that's really critical for me to get the nut at the right height. So the first fret action is perfect. Because the impact of a low first fret action on the playability and the ease of playability, I suppose, is the key thing, is quite substantial. That tiny distance, although it's quite a lot of work to get it right, that distance, or that getting the first fret action to an absolute minimum, pays off in making the guitar feel very, very much easier to play. And until you've changed it, it's one of those things that you won't ever quite notice how much a difference it is. But it's one of the things you have to kind of gauge by feel, really. Now I'm just going to do a zoom up here because there's something really important about these locking tuners that I want to point out. People buy locking tuners and they tend to think, right, I'm going to get the thing, undo it at the back, push the string through if I can, pull it all the way through, lock it, and Bob's your uncle, because that's what I bought them for. Now, if you do that, that's great, it'll work, but that is usually a crushing mechanism, and it's usually quite destructive. If you lock it now, and for some reason you had to undo the strings later on, maybe you wanted to change the tremolo or something, or even whatever you might want to do, change the saddles or something. The next time you undo it, that crushed bit will move back out to here. When you pull it through again and try to lock it again, it'll be straight back down on the crushed piece and it will break, probably break very easily. So my recommendation with the locking tuners is to come up here and pull back about a thumb's nail's worth and then lock it. right? Now that means, yes, there's a bit of slack, and yes, some of it's going to wind on round, but it obviously follows that if you have to undo it again after this point, you can then redo the whole thing again, do it up again, and when you do it up again, this time you can push the ready crushed piece through out of harm's way, and it gives you one slack off restring option, which you don't get otherwise. So you may not find that happens to you a lot. It doesn't often happen to me on Strats and Tellies, but it's quite common that you think you're at the end of a Les Paul, and then you go to lock it off if you've got locking tuners, then you go to intonate, and lo and behold, you discover that you have to take the saddles off, take the bridge off, take the saddles off, and rotate them in order to get more intonation room. If you've locked your strings at full stretch, they will break once you slack them off and do them up again to try and, once you've done the bridge adjustments and you put the bridge back in, you push it back through, they'll snap, almost certainly. So this is what I recommend as a habit. Just go back a thumbnail's worth, lock it off. Also, if you lock it off with a bit of wind around there, you'll find that you don't have to lock as hard, because this is one of the things about locking nuts is you never know, and nobody can ever tell you how hard you have to lock them in order for them to hold. And mostly we probably end up locking them too much, which does damage to the string anyway, does more damage. So the better held they are, the more likely they already have halfway broken the string. So I suggest that for the sake of a little bit of wind on, you lock off, not as hard as you would have done before, wind on that extra bit, and that extra little bit will provide you with part of the grip, and it's so little extra wire going onto the post that it really won't add hardly anything of any significance of extra slack to be stretched out. But again, even if it did, the fact that we go into quite a thorough stretching out process in a minute is it will undo that or counteract that. So I say let it pull that extra thumbnail's width, a centimetre of extra string, buy you one slack off and retighten, get out of jail free card. That's all it is. Just take it from me. I've caught myself out too many times, and now I always do this. No, it might just be that it's a guitar tech's top tip, because we're the people who always have to end up undoing the bloody thing to change a saddle round. But you might find that is you too, and you don't want to bust a string and then have to open a whole new set because you've over crimped the first time, or you've crimped as much as you had to get it to stay, but it doesn't have any leeway for slacking it off and redoing it. So we don't want to be in that position. Right, so if I now zoom out, that's that done. So we're a bit overblown, come on, thank you. So now we're in the stretchy bit. So everything, assuming I haven't done any alterations down there, everything should be still in the same kind of basic alignment. So we should be able to now tune this up roughly, and then we'll start stretching out strings, and then we'll check the intonation finally. Okay, that's not very tuned. What we'll do is we'll just get it right to pitch, and then we'll go from there. So we'll do it by hand now. What's wrong with this string? Something not right here. There's no angle. Ah, right. There's no, that's what's wrong with it, there's no angle. No brake angle. That's interesting. Well, it says there is, but this doesn't make the right noise. It's not harmonicking. How strange is that? Right, so we are going to need the other, and these are in the correct position. Let me just double check that. I'm sure I'm in the correct position. Yeah, 6 up by there. 1, 1, 1, 1. 6 on the top. Yeah, 6 on the... Yeah, I'm not crazy, am I? 6. 1. Got all the right ones in place. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Yep. That has an angle, but it's not working. That is not good. I'm going to cut backwards. Adjust backwards on the nut slot. Let's get one of these things down. This is not good. Not impressed with that at all. A little trip up. You see, this is the kind of thing that we don't expect. So this is going to be the 26. And what I'm going to do with this now is I'm going to cut backwards away from this top edge. I don't want to lower it anymore, but I want to make sure that this string goes backwards over the nut as much as I can. Doesn't like it, and that's awful. Right, just check this. What's going on here? That is weird as weird can be. Don't like that. What is wrong with this? That is not right. It's over the saddle. Yes, yes. Nothing moving there. Weird. Is this straightened out? No, it's still got relief. That is the weirdest thing I have ever felt. Oh, see, this is supposed to be straightforward. .5, just under, just about 1.5, just under. Has his neck screws moved or something? This is weird. This is bizarre. First of all, this is something, let me just check. This is not. What strings have I taken off and what have I put back on? I don't know. What has happened to these? That is weird as anything. What is going on? Something I don't know if there's something rattling in here or what's going on, but there's something is not right in this thing, and now this is what's going to really get me freaked out now, because I'm going to run out of time. Why can't this just be an ordinary thing and not present me with any crazy problems? Right, let's just block that off for a second. What is this? What the hell has happened here? This is mad. Right, it's official. I am completely mad. I have no idea what's going on here. There's space. Is it this truss rod buzzing or something? There you go. Just as I thought we were onto a straightforward, as you would imagine it, set up. There's no reason why it shouldn't be. No reason at all. And now it's sounding like a dog. Right, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take off a tiny bit of the relief off here, see if it's too flat, but I don't think it should be. So here we are, sort of counter turning it. This is bizarre. Okay, so now, guess what? I need the blasted. These strings are either slightly thinner than the ones that were on before, or something, because they've sat down further on this nut than before. I can't see how that's changed, but it seems to have happened. So I'm going to need to put a tiny lift on this. And I'll do that with a tiny bit of silver paper, silver foil I should say. What on the hell's name is going on? What have you done to me? That is the weirdest, this without a doubt is one of the weirdest things that's ever happened on any Yamaha. It's normally a perfectly straightforward arrangement. Right, now if I need to, I've actually got me a little bit of extra tusk right here, conveniently, but I guess maybe I will use it because it's the simplest, cleanest way of doing it. So I'm just going to take the glue off. I have no idea what changed between taking the original strings off and putting these on. That is completely bizarre, but I've never heard a noise like that coming out of a thing, you know what I mean. From a strung up guitar, that is just completely bizarre. Oops, let's get a fresh one. And I bet you I left my stuff at home. Yes, I did. My activator. Blast. Right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to put probably go a bit of extra hog. I don't need to go, but I'm going to do it because I want this right. So now we are going to now just clamp this in here for a bit. and leave that for a minute. No activator available. Anything in there? Anything in there? No, it's contact cleaner, I think. That's the lot. Oh, activator. There we go. See if that actually activated. So I cut off a very thin piece of tusk the other day, which is kind of convenient, so it allows me to shim this a little bit. I've honestly no idea what caused that, but no choice but to get it done and go again, because something changed. Now I don't know what it was. That's the price you pay for going to such small values. That's no good. That's no good. Rubbish material. Right, let's try that again. This is so mad. Tell you what I'm going to do. We have got a spare one in here. I'll redo that one for myself another day, and let's use this one if it's the right one. 60141. This calls itself Pacifica. Let's make sure that's the right height. It's completely odd. I'll pay him for that one, and we'll go at it another time when there's time. Let's make sure this is actually the right reach. So this time I'm going to start by doing up the middle one. You know, it might even be the nut, something about the nut. I absolutely cannot tell. It's just completely bizarre. So it's true that the end of this nut is not flush with, or it's not in line. That is a problem, but that's not the end of the world, really. Try and get this to stay in place now, would you? Okay, so let's get this up to thingy again. What in the hell is this guitar doing? I have to say, I've never come across this before. It's not the nut. This is not good. What the hell is going on here? There's no... Do you know something? I'm going to have to ditch these strings, Chris. I'm sorry. My experience has always said to me, if there's something wrong like this, the string is wrong. Now I'm going to keep the nut. I'm going to ditch these strings, and I'm sorry if they're the wrong gauge. I'm going to give you 10s, okay? And that's what the best I can do. And they're not boomers, but that is unplayable. And if this now works on the 10s, okay, then it's the strings that were faulty, and I cannot tell you why that thing didn't play. That's awful. I've never had a string as bad as that. Now, I'm not even convinced about the whole of these strings now that I've, you know, tightened them up and had to undo them. Oh shit, I'm supposed to be having a meeting with somebody now as well. Right, I'm gonna, if this doesn't play out, and if it's not a dud set of strings now, I should have suspected that in the first place, but I'm sorry, but this is history now. We can't, that's the end of it. If it's not playing, it's not playing. And there's nothing about this guitar that should not play. And the only thing that I know for a fact often goes wrong is the strings, and they're often the last thing we suspect, and I'm not prepared to suffer hours of that, and I should have bloody well questioned it in the first place. But we will find out right now as we put this on and we get ready for restringing it. So we'll go back to the original nut. We'll hold that on there like so. Unfortunately, I don't know how good this glue is at the moment. Usually it works. Right, let's get some 10s, I'm afraid. I've got some 10.5s made by someone else, but I don't trust those. What I want to do is just prove a point, I think, more than anything else, because otherwise this guitar it's just not going to play well. So nothing changed at all except the strings, and then it suddenly wouldn't play. That is too suspicious, I'm afraid. So we're going to have to suspect the strings, and I should have done that straight away without messing about with the nut. But that's my stupid mistake. Okay, please stay on there while I do up, thread the things. That has got to be the worst sounding string I have ever put on a guitar and heard from the outset. I can't believe it. And there's nothing in the way, and if this one doesn't play at all either, then there's something very, very wrong with this guitar. So I'm going to now do the same thing again. Sorry, I've also got a bloody important meeting that I've got to do. And I'll get there, Just how bizarre. Right, we'll just put this on. We'll make sure it goes on. Put it on, put it back, lock it on. Wind it on, down, up. Get this one on. So what was it that wasn't playing? It was the D that wouldn't play. I've never had that before in my life. I've had bad strings, but I've never had one as dead as that. Such that you'd think something is completely broken in the whole damn guitar. Of course, sometimes we don't suspect the obvious things, which it used to be in the past. I've had situations. Are you still recording? I've had situations where often it comes to light when you go to intonate. So you start off. See, it's a string. It's a string. God damn it! Sorry. Trust what you know. Anyway, I should have kept them, and you should have reclaimed that from GHS. That's terrible. I'm sorry, I cut them up and put them in the bin. Sorry, you saw me do it. I play them this video if they need any proof. That's crap. Anyway, the point is, going back to the story, once in a while you'd get a string that just wouldn't seem to intonate. The others would, and this one wouldn't. And I think when that happens, often people just set the intonation out of the normal pattern, and they sort of struggle. And sometimes they can intonate it, but what you end up with is the thing all off kilter. It's in the wrong place from where it should normally be. And actually, what I've discovered in the past is that when you have that happen, it's the string that's at fault. And of course, you can struggle on with it and sort of not force it, but you can get it to intonate and live with wherever the things end up. But as you can see, you know, you've got to retain your confidence in it, because you know, you can see that I just didn't trust my previous experience of what causes this problem, and it is absolutely a dud string, and I should have just suspected it and stopped wasting time. Now it's cost Chris a pack of strings, and it's cost me a wasted tusk nut that I've had to, well, I'll save and reuse, but you know, I'll try and reuse some point. But it's just annoying that's what you get from thinking something else is wrong, and my first assumption was that the nut slot was wrong, so I'm finding fault in somebody else's manufactured piece, the Graphtec piece, when in fact it's GHS and their Boomer string or whatever it's called that was at fault. Anyway, so I think we'll find that it ends happily, and obviously come the next time, Chris is going to obviously end up buying some more strings to the right gauge that he wants, slightly different gauge from this. But the thing is, I would then suspect the supplier where you bought those from, because that was so, I've never heard a string as bad as that. It was so bad that I didn't even suspect the string. Do you get what I'm saying? That's ridiculous, but it's true. So there you go. The ball got stuck, and now it's popped up. Thanks, fella. It doesn't matter, we'll wind it on. Anyway, so you can see that that's a really good live case study in what happens, and you distrust your experience, or you didn't put faith in it, and that would have been really simple. And I just decided that it's probably the string that's at fault. So for those of you who haven't had a string go like that on you, that's exactly how bizarre a badly made string can sound. And there was no harmonic at all. It wouldn't play a harmonic. So if that isn't a giveaway, I don't know what is. Trust. Right, so now I stretch a bit more on these, and we'll get them tightened up for the first go. And then I suspected the blasted nut. Gosh darn. That is so annoying, but I'm so glad that it's not something actually wrong. But you could see my brain going into fighter pilot mush, you know, too many things going on and trying to figure it all out in one go. And it only later occurred to me to late in the engagement, it occurred to me that the string is probably a load of rubbish. And guess what? The string was a load of rubbish. We'll get in a slot for a start. Incredible. I mean, truly incredible. Remarkable. Right, what I'm going to just check now is what we've got in neck relief, because I don't need that much now. I can dial a bit of that out. That was my panicking, thinking, what's going on? Slack that off and see what we can get away with. But let's tighten this up. Let's go back to straightish. Thank you. Right. So, stretch. The thorough stretch out. What's the time now? Where am I? What's the time? Lost my fingernail. What's going on? There's my phone. Holy cow, I've got to go. That's all right, I'm just on time now. The intonation bit will be so simple by comparison. I will be back in time for my meeting, which is fine. Hurrah. Blast it. Right, one more stretch and then we'll intonate and then we'll get it in the box and head for home. So, if you ever want to, in fact, what I'm going to do is I'm going to edit that little bit where I find the problem with the string, and I'm going to make a separate little short video out of it, just so I can show the casual viewer who doesn't want to sit through the whole thing just how bad it can be. Get in the nut slots. That's right. I've never seen something so bad. Yes. Get out of here. Well, would you? I mean, honestly, I mean, really. You see me losing my grip on sanity there, thinking, what the hell is going on here? I don't mind telling you, I didn't know what day it was when this Yamaha walked into the room. I expect this to be on. Yeah. Chris knows what he's doing with the intonation. Well, there you go. After all of that panicky crazy, we're done. Thank you for watching. Thank you for being with me in my most panicked moments. I'm glad I was able to provide you with some entertainment and an insight into guitar tech losing his mind on the clock. I mean, that's the worst bit of all, is to lose your mind on the clock. And you could see the time ticking away and me thinking, how the hell is this going to work? Followed by, well, I'll send it back, and then followed by in the back of my mind, but what's the point of sending it back if I can't even figure out what's wrong with it? I'm doomed. And so on and so on and so on. So it was a little quiet meltdown there for you, especially for you. Let's put the spare bits together. Together. Actually, I'll put this one in here. See, actually, no, I'll keep this one because it's a slight different height now because I've adjusted it thanks to trying to find out what was wrong. Anyway, there we go. So let's put these back on and we'll be away. Yes, there you go. Case study in losing it. And then recovering. So if I was your pilot of your aircraft, I'd probably have a screaming abdabs for a minute. And then I'd go and get composed, and I'd come back and solve the problem and rescue the passengers and save the day. But for a minute you'd think you were doomed and going to crash into the sea. Just got to let you know. For some reason this doesn't really want to fit in here. Get in. Oh, spare bits. You can go in there as well. In there. This just doesn't quite fit. Squeeze. Well, honestly. Right, that's that. Done. All those bits done. That's done. Come back for another day. Thank you very much. Sorry it was a panic. See you soon.